Ahoy fellow gamers! Most of you know me as a content creator, but my professional career that I'm pursuing in is writing. I do a bunch of script writing for my own projects while I'm not working on Dead by Daylight videos, but during the month of February and March, I had produced a Dead by Daylight chapter concept called Unlawful Retribution. Now you could read the blog post that was released to the public, but I expect some people to enjoy the video format rather than reading. Grab a drink, play this in the background like a podcast if you wish, and enjoy my chapter concept for the 2016 survival horror game called Dead by Daylight. Unlawful Retribution is an original chapter concept for Dead by Daylight. This chapter is not based off a license or an IP, but instead built from the ground up by myself. The chapter is set during the mid-80s, on the streets of Birmingham. This is during the time when Margaret Thatcher was in power, and people were unhappy with her nationwide decisions. Hence the public was always brawling against the police. The first character that we have in Unlawful Retribution is Daniel Jones, also known as the Constable. He is a 7'2" white male who left the tranquil life of Cornwall to join the West Midlands police force, where his limits had been pushed due to the changes in behaviour of mild crime in Cornwall to the retaliation of Birmingham citizens who hated change. Our second character is Robin Evans, a 20-year-old university student from Cambridge. All of his life he has been given opportunities that he couldn't handle, and this part of the chapter focuses on the thought of the future. How everybody is taught unnecessary things while at school and then pushed out into the big world with no guidance. As you can probably tell, Daniel Jones, aka the Constable, is the killer of this chapter, and Robin Evans is the survivor. Let's start off with the Constable.
Daniel Jones was always a man of principle when growing up within the streets of Penzance. He would wander the streets every day and night to look out for his community, as well as a steady job. Though little was put on the table from the low-income jobs that his parents worked, Daniel excelled within his school years at subjects such as history and PE. His favourite term within PE would be boxing, where he would let out a tranquil but steady rage while he wailed upon his fellow pupils, especially those who wished to let their wrath upon the unfortunate ones. Daniel would work multiple jobs ranging from lifting crates of fish at the harbour, helping his father down at the coal mines, and eventually securing a role within the Cornish and Devon police force. However, his paper round was the job that led him towards the law, after experiencing a horrific act of robbery, leaving a convenience storekeeper dead by gunshot to the face. Daniel dedicated his life to the law by solving crimes and patrolling the streets day and night. He would handle suspects with care, but would use brute force on those who disobeyed his commands. On a Tuesday night down at the pub while off duty, Daniel overheard a conversation about the big city and the rise of crime. He had approached the gentleman who summarized the increase in automobile theft, hate crime and arson. His motives to move to the big city were not shown, but judging by his hatred for hooliganism and citizens stepping out of line, he moved to protect the victims of crime. Sadly for Daniel, Brummies were a lot different than the Cornish. The civilians were filled with hatred, and the detained were more resistant and colourful. Daniel's patience began to boil up. He would drink and question why people wanted to live life on the brim, and how he felt that he was leading the police force even though he was a constable. One gloomy Friday night, Daniel had caught some underage drinkers within an underground nightclub. He had detained 2 of 3 suspects, but as the light beamed on his eyes and the intoxicating music blasted into his ears, Daniel had lost consciousness from a sudden headache. While on the ground, the teenagers and the other participants had begun to kick and punch the officer. Inside of Daniel's mind was darkness, but a spark of something that he had not experienced before had woken him up, but within a rage. He grabbed a teenager who was punching him by the collar and headbutted him straight on, breaking his face, followed by punching a woman in the kneecap, inverting her leg. People began to scatter away, but the 7'2" man would catch up to those who suffered a painful death. The constable had left a bloody trail behind him, and he was yet to get onto the streets of Birmingham.
That was the Constable's backstory. This may have been a weird place to end, however, the backstory is connected with the survivor's lore. I've done this as lore connections and characters encountering each other has been a popular demand in the Dead by Daylight community. The Constable wields a 40-inch extendable police baton, invented in the late 70s. He strikes down the survivors with discipline, and damages them for 1 health state. The Constable is also a 24-metre terror radius killer, and moves at 4.6 metres per second. Moving on to his power, the Constable's power is called Bring Them to Justice. You gain the undetectable status when using Bring Them to Justice. When you are between 16 to 4 metres away from a survivor, you have the ability to stalk your opposition. If the survivor has not escaped the killer's FOV in time of the whistle sound cue, the constable will shout and point at the direction of the survivors, and the survivors in his FOV will freeze for 2.5 seconds, allowing the constable to strike down the survivor during the stun time. Bring Them to Justice can stun multiple survivors and has a cooldown of 60 seconds. The use of this power is not to catch survivors off guard, but also to get survivors off generators, exit gates, totems, and other interactables. Bring Them to Justice has add-ons that reduce its recovery time, as well as increasing the stun time. I have 2 add-ons to show in this video, first starting with the broken bottle. This bottle has been knocked over by a civilian escaping the constable's grasp in the underground nightclub on the night of the bloodthirsty massacre. The broken bottle moderately reduces Bring Them to Justice recovery time. His second add-on is a bloodied candy bar. This candy bar was retrieved from the crime scene after a Cornish shop owner was shot blankly in the face with a handgun. Blood had sprayed all over the counter, and all the confectionery chocolate was coated with the blood of an innocent man. The bloodied candy bar considerably increases stun time when Bring Them to Justice is used on 2 or more survivors, but moderately decreases the stun time when Bring Them to Justice is used on 1 survivor. Each character within Dead by Daylight has 3 teachable perks, which benefits and improves the flow of gameplay. With the constable, I've decided to base his perks off the concept of rage, which links back to his lore. Starting off strong is his first teachable perk, Panicked Rage. You're hesitant when something doesn't go your way, which makes you incandescent. When a generator is completed, gain the following stats for 10 seconds. Destroy dropped pallets and breakable walls 15, 25 and 35% faster. Your vault speed is increased by 5, 10 and 15%. And survivors within 16, 32 and 64 metres of you are exposed. Panicked Rage is used in situations where the odds are in your favour, and this perk will come in handy on killers that have high mobility like the Blight. Our next teachable perk is Piping Hot Blood. Cuts and bruises won't stop you. You become obsessed with 1 survivor. Every time the obsession stuns you, destroy dropped pallets 25% faster for 3 seconds. Piping Hot Blood has a cooldown of 30, 25 and 20 seconds when the perk is activated. You can only be obsessed with 1 survivor. Piping Hot Blood is a perk that focuses on downing your obsession. Like Panicked Rage, Piping Hot Blood works well with perks like Brutal Strength, so you can become a mean green pallet-breaking machine. The Constable's final teachable perk is Hex. No one escapes the law. No one is going to get out of your range anytime soon. Once the exit gates are powered, if there is a dull totem remaining on the map, this Hex is applied to it. While Hex No One Escapes the Law is active, your movement speed is increased by 7% for 40, 50 and 60 seconds. Once you are out of options, Hex No One Escapes the Law comes into play. Moving slightly faster may mean having a chance of getting a survivor off an exit gate before it opens. On another note before we move on to the survivor of this chapter, the constable had some concept cosmetics. The first is of his standard look, drawn by demonrat_ph on Instagram. The constable then had other 2 costumes planned, being a British World War I officer who wields a trench club, and the constable's casual wear wielding a tire iron. Survivors have no chance up against the brute force and authoritarian mindset of the constable. That is, if your name isn't Robin Evans.
Robin Evans was born and raised in Cambridgeshire, England. His middle-class family had lots of connections, and their reputation of being clever and well-educated had shown through their son's success during his academic years at primary and secondary school. He took on the role of a shy but intelligent child while going through school to avoid trouble and being mocked. He barely spoke to his teachers and only had a handful of friends, however they never got to find out his vigorous lifestyle outside his fake persona. Robin would play sports outside of the East Anglian region under an alias to hide his identity from being exposed. The type of sports that he was into involved physical contact, so playing rugby and ice hockey had been his favourite pastime. By the age of 18, Robin had gone into a depressed state. Though he was offered all of these opportunities, and his family had pushed him towards accounting and construction, he didn't know what to do with his life. He thought that going for a life of sports was a waste, and that the jobs his family had offered him were dead-end jobs. On the 12th of March 1985, Robin had visited a university open day at Cambridge. He had booked a private meeting with a tutor who led him into the world of science. The tutor had convinced Robin that what he would be doing wouldn't be worth nothing or helping no one, but instead making the world a better place. Both of them shared the same experiences, being that the tutor's parents had also pushed him towards their occupations to continue the family's traditions. Robin Evans enrolled at Cambridge University on September 1985, where he took a degree in botany. His life had become much better. He had opened up to his friends about the different hobbies that he was invested in, to the point where he played for the reserve rugby team for Cambridge University. He could finally express himself. He and his friends would go down to Cornwall every summer to attend a few parties and do some pier jumping. While in the winter they would play sports in the local park. Though Robin wasn't big on drinking, his friends were notorious for partying. They gave him the idea to travel to central Birmingham on Friday night. They had heard of street parties that the locals had thrown, and the raves on the outskirts, so Robin and his friends bought a train ticket to Birmingham that day. In regards to consumption, they started quite quietly, ordering some cider and watching the football on the TV inside of the pub. After a few drinks, they headed towards the Underground, inside a nightclub that was famous for the latest music and underpriced alcoholic beverages. Minutes went on for hours, and after one too many, the boys decided to leave. Just as they were leaving, a 7'2" Metropolitan walked past them. One of Robin's friends thought it was funny to shoulder him on the way out, which the constable looked at the group of adults in disgust and made eye contact with Robin. After glaring at the intoxicated fellas, the officer continued his quest. Robin's night was about to end as half of his friends could barely walk and were close to blacking out, but as his drunken friends were taking a whiz on the wall, the screams of civilians had dominated the night sky. He was curious about the commotion and had a peek around the corner to see the townsfolk scattering, as a Metropolitan-looking police officer was storming behind them, eliminating them one by one. Robin recognised the same police officer as the one who entered the nightclub, but he was different this time. He was covered in blood, he was frothing from the mouth, and his skin was paler. Robin knew this wasn't a case of an officer who went rogue, and so he proceeded to break into a local chip shop to equip himself with a trusty fire extinguisher. He wanted to tackle the problem straight on. By the time he got what he needed, the constable was at the front door, breaking the ribs of his fellow friend. In fury, he sprayed the police officer with a fire extinguisher foam, but this didn't stop the constable from striking down his police baton and missing Robin's arm by inches. Once the foam was depleted, Robin threw the fire extinguisher at him, but it had no effect. He was then thrown off by a police officer and his police force shouting for him to move, to which the constable had struck Robin in the face with his fist, putting him into an unconscious state. Everything was black, but he could hear the gunshots and the wretched scream of the constable. The sounds went on for hours upon end. Was this his punishment for failing? Would it be better to die and for the screams to go away? What happened that Friday night didn't get out to the nation due to the lack of technology, but the streets of Birmingham weren't the same. The city was shut off for months. Bodies were collected and debris piled up. The blood had stained the sidewalk. The culprit was never found. They managed to identify and find all those who were killed in this heinous act. All but one.
Dressed casually, Robin Evans roams the entity's world, searching for answers and a way back home. Robin Evans comes with 3 teachable perks, starting with Born Tough. Your confidence is strong and won't stop anything in your way. When running up to a breakable wall, press the active ability button. The breakable wall will break and you gain a 5% haste status effect for 5 seconds. Causes the exhaustion effect for 60, 50 and 40 seconds. Though Born Tough sounds like a useless and situational perk, it can open up doorways that lead to longer chases. For example, you could break the wall on Coal Tower right next to the gen for a faster escape route. Our next teachable perk on Robin Evans is I Need a Hero. You'll want to spot out a disaster waiting to happen, and you'll do anything about it. Gain the following status for each scenario. 1 hook survival within the basement. Sprint at 110, 125 and 150% speed once in the basement. 2 hook survivors within the basement. Gain the endurance status once in the basement. 3 hook survivors within the basement. All of the above, and increase other survivor speeds by 5, 10 and 15%. The 150% speed bonus does not stack with perks that increase your sprint speed. I Need a Hero deactivates once you are out of the basement. I Need a Hero is used in those situations where your fellow friends are in the basement, maybe getting camped by an insidious bubba. And the final teachable perk for Robin Evans is the Cambridge Classic. Being a smartass finally paid off. Once a generator is completed, the Cambridge Classic will randomly choose 1 perk from the killer's roster, and the perk icon of the Cambridge Classic will switch with the chosen killer perk for 3, 6 or 9 seconds. If the killer has no perks, the Cambridge Classic will deactivate. The Cambridge Classic is an informative perk that feeds survivors intel towards what the killer is running, perk-wise. Robin Evans also comes with a map offering, the streets of Birmingham. Tremendously increases the chance to be sent to the streets of Birmingham when burnt. Once the constable had fled the scene, the streets of Birmingham was in ruin. Only 1 lamp lit up the street, and the beaming light displayed the blood stain on the sidewalk. This sends the survivor and the killer to a dark and misty street of Birmingham, which was once inhabited by civilians. Now it's a hunting ground for crazed killers. Players can roam around the streets, in the buildings, and the basement themed off the nightclub that started all of this. Sadly, Robin Evans has no concept art. This is because a photo shoot was planned around this time of the month. It got cancelled due to costs. I didn't have a bursary, if you're wondering. This doesn't mean that he has 3 planned cosmetics. The first is his base cosmetic, consisting of a double-breasted coat, cream trousers, smart shoes, and a flicked over hair. His second look would be of him dressed up in clubbing attire, which relates to what he wore in his law. And his third look would have him in a wetsuit, complemented with a pair of aviators. Thank you for watching this video on the Dead by Daylight chapter concept, Unlawful Retribution. I really appreciate it if you did watch this to the end, as I've been working on this project for 2 months. It was really fun diving into the 80s theme and creating these characters, especially the Constable. As much as I appreciate the praise, it's worth thanking WheatDraws, DemonRat_PH, Asimovs and Declan Bushnell for helping me with this project. I wouldn't be able to visualise this idea properly if I didn't receive their help. I hope that you stay with me during this journey, as this will be one of 4 chapter concepts for this year, with the next one right around the corner in the next month's release. I'll see you again in mid-May to June. Goodbye, gamers. Ground.